Good evening. Welcome to the December 3rd, 2019 regular meeting of the East Lansing City Council. I hereby call this meeting to order. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Councilmember Babcock?
Present.
Councilmember Gregg?
Present.
Councilmember Meadows?
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Stevens?
Here.
Mayor Byer?
Here. Okay, next on the agenda is the approval of the agenda. Can I have a motion?
I'll move the approval of the agenda. I have a couple of amendments if we get.
Moved by Councilmember Meadows, seconded by the Mayor Pro Tem.
I have two amendments, actually. One to add item 4.4 to appoint Lindsay Gray to the Historic District Commission for a term ending on 12/31/21.
12 what?
31/21.
Did you get that?
That's a partial term. Yeah,
Any
should have said partial term.
Any
Yeah.
discussion on that amendment?
Just do a second, and I will second that one.
Seconded by the Mayor Pro Tem. All in favor of this amendment, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That amendment has passed.
And then a second amendment to add on item 4.5 to approve a resolution congratulating Colonel James Allen on over 31 years of service in the United States Army.
I will second that amendment as well.
A motion by Councilmember Meadows, seconded by the Mayor Pro Tem. No discussion? Is that being there? All right, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That amendment is also passed. And now we're back to the agenda itself. Can I have any other amendments? All those in favor of approving the agenda as amended, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, we have an approved agenda. Now we move on to the minutes from the last meeting, the regular council meeting of November 19th, and the special discussion-only meeting of November 19th. Have a motion to approve?
I will move.
Moved by Councilmember Gregg.
Second.
Seconded by the Mayor Pro Tem. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? We have some minutes. Okay, now we're moving on to the communications portion of the agenda. I've been working with staff to make sure that all of the communications are posted online. I think we talked a little bit about what was going on before. We had a system that was working, but some things just slipped through the cracks, so we're trying to make sure there aren't any cracks. To emphasize, again, that wasn't really anybody's fault. It was just more of the process we were using. So all those communications are posted online. But if you sent something in or know of something that should be there, please let me know personally, and I'll make sure it gets up there. The next section of the agenda is communications from the audience. I have one blue card for somebody who wants to speak, Ms. Alice Drager, and I don't have any other blue cards. So if anybody wants to speak, please come up and grab a blue card when Ms. Drager is finished.
So I did want to ask about how communications are working.
Hang on one second. I'm sorry, Alice. What?
I gave you a-
Right. This is just in case that issue comes up.
Okay.
Yep, sorry.
I did want to ask about how communications are working because I remain confused.
Okay.
So regarding the 5 court consolidation communications that I communicated with council about, and that's in your packet, the response I got from Mr. Lahanis' office is that if something comes in an envelope and they're not sure what the envelope said with regard to who it's supposed to go to, then they might not make it to council because they don't know who it's intended for. But the communications that were provided, 4 out of 5 of them were addressed explicitly to city council. So I don't see why an envelope would matter.
I doubt that that's what the city manager said. Could you clear that up?
That's not what I said. What I said was if it had come in an envelope directed to a particular city council member.
Right. And that's the method that.
That's the method, and we would put it into someone's box previously. So now the new method is that we are slitting all the envelopes, looking at them to make sure that it doesn't contain something for general applicability or that of concern to the city. If it's of a personal nature, it will go into the council member's mailbox. Otherwise, it will go onto the agenda as normal and be distributed at that point. So that's what I mentioned, and that's what we'll be doing.
Right, and maybe I wasn't clear. I really can't fix anything that happened in the past. All I can do is your question of, I mean, you can say whatever you want, obviously, but what I was talking about is what we're doing going forward.
So my concern is also going forward.
Okay.
And my concern is that in the past, it appears that somebody on staff made a decision not to include in the packet items that were addressed explicitly to city council. I have remained concerned that it might be the case that somebody on staff is willing and able to do that.
Right, and I have, that isn't, I mean, that's not what happened. What happened was communications were put in individual mailboxes and they never got back to be put on the agenda. I think that's what happened. Like I said, I'm not investigating the past, I'm just going forward. But I have talked to the one staff person who does this. It's not like we have a room full of people. And she said, everything that comes in, she will open, and if it's addressed to council or one council member about council business, then it will go up.
Okay, thank you. So let me ask about today's packet, which includes a communication, or two communications regarding the hub and the issue with the vapor, with the Eagle issue.
Right.
So I'm not sure why those were included, and I'm especially not sure why, if those were included, you didn't also include the responses from the hub, which the hub attorney has now provided me. So why are those there?
Those would be there because they came in and I instructed the person who opens the mail to put everything in like that in there.
It wasn't addressed to council, though,
Who was it addressed to?
the city manager. I'm just trying to understand what I have to FOIA, what I'm going to be able to see, what I'm
Right.
not going to be able to see.
Mr. Lahanas?
The letter was actually addressed to the mayor of East Lansing, and that's why it got temporarily mislaid, because it was put in an individual mailbox. And when we figured out what it was, we've opened it and we distributed it to everybody, put it on the agenda.
So
Okay.
things
That's why.
addressed to the mayor will be included in council communications?
That's just what we
If
said.
it's something like that, yes. If it's, you're a dirty, dirty dog, no. I mean, seriously, that's an issue that's going on, that's something that council is going to be talking about. And if the reply wasn't there, perhaps we didn't get it quickly enough to get
It
it
was
up.
actually dated the same period.
Well,
Okay.
Yeah, that's
Thank
my
you.
intention. I promise you, Alice, I want to put as much up as possible without putting spam up. That's my goal.
I totally understand. It's just, it's very difficult for me to understand what we're seeing without struggle and what we still need to struggle for.
Right, okay. My goal is less struggle.
I appreciate that, and I
Yep.
really have that sense. Thank
All
you.
right, yeah. Anybody else like to comment? Okay, moving on to communications from the mayor and council member. Let's start, I left with our newest council member. We have two new council members.
Well, I was remiss a few weeks ago, and I did not thank ASMSU for putting on Mental Health Week, and I really want to commend them for that. There's a lot of stigma around mental health, and I think it's something between mental health and substance abuse, something probably every family has been affected by. And I really commend the students at MSU for addressing that issue. I know from personal experience, especially as an attorney, that a lot of mental health issues arise in the age bracket where college students are, and yet it's something that often goes unaddressed. So I want to thank you. And that leads me to my second point. Today is National Disability Day. This is also near and dear to my heart. I have a younger sister who uses a wheelchair because of a degenerative disease, and as I was running for office, I noticed there are an awful lot of neighborhoods without sidewalks, and there are many reasons why neighborhoods might not have sidewalks, but it's hard for me not to see that through a prism of inaccessibility. And of course, that extends beyond simply wheelchairs, but also parents with strollers and other issues. So those are some of the issues that I've become more aware of as I've run. So hopefully those are some things we'll keep in mind as we go forward.
Thank you, Councilmember Babcock. Councilmember Gregg?
I do not have anything today.
Thank you. Councilmember Meadows?
Just want to mention that we're going to be playing, MSU is playing Duke tonight, so I'm saying go green. So
Go white. Thank you. Mayor Pro Tem?
I'd like to thank ASMSU for hosting a city ASMSU brunch today. It was a great event. It is every semester where we bring city staff and ASMSU together to discuss a bunch of issues. I think the city manager asked a lot of really, really great questions at that meeting, not limited to development downtown, housing issues, safety issues, and it was a really good conversation. So I'm always thankful for that kind of communication. I think it went really well. A congratulations to the Spicer Group that myself and Councilmember Gregg attended an office opening in East Lansing and the Northern Tier today. Really, really nice office, good location. Glad to see office space in the Northern Tier opening up. And then I do have one more thing that is going to be a little bit longer, and I apologize for that. And I honestly wasn't going to mention this today, but certain things came up at the University Student Commission, so I feel like it is important that I mention it. So at the November 19th meeting, I outlined certain follow-up questions that I wanted answered from the hub development on what they did to rectify their mistakes during move-in and the issues that we had heard from tenants. I outlined specific numbers that I wanted to see, including but not limited to how many tenants were given reduced rent, how many vouchers were given out for food and or lodging, as they said they would give that because of the late move-in and so many people had to stay extra time. What improvements they had made to rooms that were not as advertised when people actually moved in. These were numbers that I wanted to see so I could assess whether or not they made good on their promises to rectify what went wrong. I later that week received an email from Rod D. King, who actually, in the spirit of making sure that things are on a public meeting, although that was emailed just addressed to me, I will email it to the council and have it included in a written communication in the future, just because I think it is relevant to the rest of the council. I appreciate that. That commitment. Who sent me a document not outlining those numbers, but showing positive Google reviews for their project, and then a claim in that email that they were voted the most desirable place to live by the State News. State News has been an institution in this community for a very long time, and a great one at that, so that carries some weight with me. So I decided to reach out to the managing editor to verify this claim. Turns out that claim was via a Facebook/Google poll done in March of this year, before the project was ever actually finished and before people moved in. That's a grand misrepresentation of that fact. And the manager indicated to me that this was not an award they gave out, but simply a non-scientific poll that was done by them. So to ask for numbers and to get that back and what I think is a misrepresentation of the truth was not a good thing for me. I viewed my request at our last meeting as an opportunity for them to prove to myself and the council that while they made mistakes, they were good on their word to fix them. But this email outlining plush Google reviews and none of the information that I had cited was a sad sight for me. I wasn't going to mention this today because I met with a representative from their group earlier who apologized for the falsehood and told me they would get those accurate numbers, and I'm still hoping that I see those. But after meeting with the University Student Commission, I found out another, what I would call lie of omission. While there are many positive Google reviews, a couple of students at the USC indicated to me that the hub ran a promotion on Instagram and other social media offering the chance to win an iPad and other gifts if they left a Google review about the hub. That extended far beyond the people that actually lived in that project, but those are a lot of those Google reviews. Or I can assume a part of them. So, when they came to us and said that they would make things right, I wanted every chance, and I want them to do so. And I'm still hoping that I can see numbers that prove that they did. But to give me back what I would call a fluff piece on Google reviews that I can't actually verify whether are residents or not, and then to make a claim about a institution that is very reputable in this city, that I then found out was a misrepresentation, was not okay with me, especially with a developer that is going to be in our community for a very, very long time, a management company that will be in our community for a very long time, and a project that I was really excited about when I voted for it. So that was not okay by my book, and I'm hoping to see numbers that indicate that they did actually rectify that situation, and not to see another communication to me that I think represented falsehoods.
Thank you. And I have two comments this evening. I'm really enjoying being your mayor, by the way, and I'm really proud to be, much more than I thought I would. And every place I go in the city, I feel like an ambassador now, which means I can't wear my pajamas to Myers. But besides that, So one of the things that I've decided to do, because I do it sort of anyway, but I'm doing it with a different light, is I'm gonna mayor by running around. So I run almost every morning in the dark, and I've been noticing things. Like this morning, it was like 5:45 in the morning, and we had city staff out blowing leaves, I assume because it's too loud to do it during the day. And it's just such an amazing thing to see how the city works behind the scenes. And I'm not going to be a Pollyanna mayor. I also notice a lot of things. But I do want to point out positive things when I see them. So I saw that, I was running, and I thought about the 100-year sewers I was running over, and then I remembered, yeah, but we've got an electorate that voted to tax itself so we could fix that, and I'm very, very proud of that. We've got a community that voted to build 5 new schools and renovate another school. That's not city issues, but it's where I live, and I'm just proud of that. So that kind of thing. We had an issue up in the Pinecrest neighborhood a few weeks ago. There were off-leash dogs. The neighbors called wanted some input from the police, and they went out there and explained the law. So we've got a city that's working well, and I just wanted to take this time because I'm the mayor, to tell you how proud I am to be the mayor of East Lansing. So we'll go on. City manager's report.
No report this evening, thank you.
Okay. And city attorney's report.
Thank you, Mayor. I would like to request at the conclusion of tonight's meeting that council go into closed session to discuss a trial or settlement strategy in the case of Country Mill Farms LLC versus City of East Lansing, which is pending in the United States District Court, Western District of Michigan, case number 117 CV 487. It's my belief and understanding, and I confirmed with Mr. Bogren that an open meeting would be detrimental to the city's financial effect on the city's litigation and settlement position. So,
Okay, if I forget, please remind me for that motion. All right, thank you. All right, now, Section 3, a special presentation on the 2019 audit from Plante Moran. Here we go.
Good evening. Tonight, we have Plante Moran with us. They are our auditors. They are going to give you results of our fiscal year 19 audit. You have the reports in front of you in hard copy. Everything is also on iCompass. Obviously, it takes a lot of time and effort since it is December and our year end was June 30th. So I would like to take a moment and first thank council and the city manager for your guidance and your support throughout the year, but also to the finance department. Tonight we have Justin Geiger with us. He is our budget and accounting analyst. Audrey Kincaid also plays an integral part, but she is sick tonight, so I would like to still say thank you to her. She is our project manager. She runs the day-to-day of the audit, does a ton of work, not only to prepare, but also to get the reports ready that are in front of you. I think with that, I will kind of push it over to the auditors. Tonight we have Alicia Watkins with us. She is the partner on the engagement. We also have Amanda Kronk with us, who is the manager, and Tyler Luce, who is the in charge. So they do have a short presentation that I will pull up here for them. And then as they go through, I'm sure they will be more than happy to answer any questions or concerns that you might have. And they'll also walk you through what reports you have in front of you.
Thank you.
Yep.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Jill, thank you for the introduction, and I also want to thank you and your team for the time and effort that goes into preparing for the audit and for the assistance and cooperation that you provide our team. We certainly appreciate it. Also want to extend our appreciation to Council and Administration for the opportunity to be here and continue to serve as your auditors. Certainly appreciate that and are grateful for it. So we do complete 2 audits for the city. One is an audit of your comprehensive annual financial report or your financial statements, which I think were distributed this evening.
Yep.
And then we also prepare or complete an audit of the federal awards, and so you also have that report in front of you. What we'd like to do this evening, just briefly, is instead of going through the large financial statement document, we'll go through the presentation that Jill pulled up and just cover some of the highlights. And then we'll just briefly talk about our letter. What I will mention on the large document that's not in your package is that you did in fact receive an unmodified opinion on your financial statements, which basically means that our opinion on your financial statements are without exception. It's the highest level of assurance you can receive and what you should expect as a council from your team. So kudos there. There are a couple comments that I'll leave you with just in terms of overview of where the city's at financially, best practices that are not in the graph package. The graph package really focuses on current year results. So the city does continue to use multi-year budgeting practices, which is critically important. We used to call that a best practice, and now we'd say today it's critical and it's necessary to ensure you're doing the right thing for long-term sustainment of the city. And so we're pleased to see that your team is continuing to do that and be thoughtful around long-term planning for the city. Relative to your general fund, which you're well aware is kind of your main operating fund activity, it's also encouraging to see that your team continues to outperform your budget. So every year, it's a very rigorous process that goes into setting your maximum authorized spending levels. And despite kind of having that balanced budget, your team does a great job of still looking for opportunities throughout the year to contain costs and, as a council and as a city overall, to identify revenue generation ideas. And so it's encouraging to see you continuing to outperform your budget and continuing to have strong financial results. The income tax is a new revenue source. As you're aware, there was some discussion about the voters approving that. That is in its infancy stage, and I'm sure you're aware of that, but I just wanted to emphasize it will take a couple of years to normalize that revenue stream and kind of see where you're going to land on that. So the team continues to work through that, but as that's happening, there's a lot of estimates and projections that continue to go into where you think you'll be long-term in terms of revenue collections for income taxes. So what does that mean overall? What it means is that the City of East Lansing is doing all the right things in terms of financial processes and practices, and even your right financial results. You're best in class. There's no question about that. However, I do want to caution you that you're not completely out of the woods. And that would be the case with a lot of your peer communities, because there's still a lot of things that are out of your control. For all the things that you're doing right and the critical decisions you're making, you still have significant legacy costs with pension and retiree health care. And those numbers keep moving and changing with what's happening in the economy, healthcare costs, and that's out of your control. So just a word of caution there that challenge will continue to be before you for many years to come, as will the ongoing challenges with deferred capital and infrastructure. Mayor, you mentioned some of that, running over the 100-year sewers. That's going to be continue challenge, very, very significant costs. So those are just a couple of cautionary remarks to be mindful of as you continue planning for the city's future. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Tyler and Amanda to go through the graph presentation.
Thank you.
Good evening. So I'm going to cover, let me get to the next slide here. I'm going to cover the general fund, synopsis of kind of how the general fund performed this year, and then Amanda's going to cover some of the legacy costs, and then wrap up with the enterprise funds. So the first slide is just a synopsis of what the general fund is and a quick definition. One thing I wanted to point out for our presentation purposes is that the income tax fund, new fund this year, and the seniors fund for reporting purposes get rolled together with the general fund. So there'll be some items that get rolled up that I'll explain. It's not necessarily just the general fund, but for reporting purposes, we consider it all the general fund. So just wanted to highlight that. And then the first slide that we have here is specifically the general fund revenues. So in total, there was a significant increase this year from $35.3 million. That's including transfers into the general fund. And that is up to $41.4 million in revenues. The most significant of which you can see on this slide here is income taxes. So for the half a year, from January 1st through June 30th, there was $4.6 million collected in income tax revenues. And you'll notice that property tax and related revenue, the assessments also increased this year. So you're probably asking yourself, okay, well, we thought there was going to be a decrease in this revenue. And really that's just an offset of it's going to be effective for the tax year upcoming, fiscal year 2020, so we'll see a decrease of the 5 mils effective for that year. So there was an increase of $916,000 related to property tax revenue, and that's really just related to an increase in the overall taxable value base. And next here is general fund expenditures. So public safety continues to be, for the general fund, a significant piece of the general fund expenditures. And then the second is the general government. very consistent expenditures year over year. The total expenditures this year were roughly 36.1 million, and last year was 35.7 million. And a lot of that's going to be attributed to the administrative costs for the income tax fund and some of the costs going into that. Then on the next slide, kind of summarizes the total revenues and expenditures. So what this truly highlights is the revenue is exceeding expenditures, which is great news. And what that corresponds to is an increase in fund balance this year. So because there were excess revenue that's going to get allocated according to the income tax allocation, there was an increase in fund balance. So the news is that it's not necessarily unassigned because those monies are going to be used for a specific purpose. So it's not, just free money, but it's definitely going to be something that increases fund balance for comparability over year. And then on the next slide is the general fund balance by component. And as you can see on this, and it just emphasizes that there's 4.6 million sitting in restricted fund balance, and that's for the income tax allocation. So that's the primary thing. And then another item to point out on this slide would be the unassigned fund balance. So a good metric for that is the percent of unassigned fund balance as a percent of expenditures. So the city positively had roughly 14.1% of unassigned fund balance as a percent of general fund expenditures. So what that means is there's roughly 2 months worth of expenditures sitting in fund balance in reserves. So if there is unexpected costs that arise and items that you need to be agile, so there's roughly 2 months of fund balance sitting.
Before you leave that page, do you happen to know, excuse me, off the top of your head, what the unassigned percentage was last year?
I don't. It would be
I think it
very
was around
similar.
16, that's, okay,
Yep.
so it's just
Yep,
a
very
little bit higher. Thank you.
Yep. Thank
That's
you.
close enough.
And now Amanda's going to cover the legacy costs.
Thank you, Tyler. So Alicia briefly mentioned focusing on your legacy costs and the promised benefits that have been made to city employees. So we just wanted to briefly touch on what is included in these liabilities, along with contributions that the city made during the fiscal year. So as you can see here, that annual pension cost that the city is incurring is really made up of two components. The first is the normal cost. So that really represents the service that your employees provided the city during the year that are pensionable. That coupled with paying a portion of your unfunded liability, so meaning the actuary calculates what portion of prior service you need to pay during the current year to calculate what's called your annual required contribution, if you will. So under state law, you would be required to make that. So on the next slide, we'll touch on where you're at in comparison to that state requirement. Retiree healthcare is, again, more of the same. The normal cost, again, is what your employees have earned during the current year. And the city has really attacked both of these liabilities by making supplemental payments as possible and within your budget constraints. Again, the income tax will certainly help. The pension, as a part of that, again, is restricted for pension funding. Another difference here that I did want to point out, so you are not obligated or you're not required by the state to make required contributions to your retiree health care. So that is one difference from your pension to your OPEB or your retiree health care that I just wanted to make sure we were all aware of. So quickly here, you'll see your pension contributions during the year. So the teal bar represents your actually determined contribution or the amount you're required to pay annually. That this year was just about $7.3 million. You can see that the orange bar is higher than the teal bar. So the orange bar does represent the actual contributions that the city made to your pension system during the year. That orange bar in 2019 represents about $8.4 million. So the city did make an additional contribution of about $1.1 million. So again, this is keeping in line with your practices and certainly trying to get ahead of those liabilities as much as possible. Moving on to retiree healthcare, again, this is telling you the same information. The teal bar represents what the actuary said you would need to fund this year. The orange bar represents what the city did fund. Again, a similar story. So even though the orange bar isn't higher than the teal bar, it is still much closer than other communities. So again, the city's paying its premiums as they're due, which is included in that orange bar. And the city did make a supplemental payment of $100,000. So again, you're focusing on that when you certainly can within the budget constraints that you have. So again, you're making strides when you can, and that's important. We did want to spend just a few minutes talking about the enterprise funds and really how you can measure the health of those funds. So we know that that's sometimes a challenge just because those funds do operate a little bit differently. So we're going to focus on the city's sewage disposal system, the water system, and then the parking funds. So a few things to think about here as we look at the next few slides. Are the current costs that the users are paying to use that system covering what it costs the city to operate that system? So are those funds operating with an operating income? So I think that's really indicator number one. Indicator number two, are those systems generating cash and sufficient cash to pay both any related debt payments and make investments in the infrastructure? So again, the sewer system that was referenced. And then lastly, have our current assets, less our current liabilities, been taken into account when setting rates and looking at rates and analyzing those rates? So I don't necessarily think we need to go into too much detail in the next couple slides. We did summarize all three of those bullets on these next three slides for you. So maybe what I'll do, just in the interest of time, is I'll quickly cover maybe sewage disposal and then certainly would take questions on the others. It's a similar story for all three. So if we could start on the left, the operating results there really tell you that your operating revenue exceeded your operating expenses for all three of those systems. So meaning your current users are paying a correct rate to cover the costs that it takes to run that system. Now, what that cash basis analysis table is telling you is that your operating income, if you take out depreciation, is a little bit below what your current debt and capital costs are during the current year. Now, that's not necessarily a bad picture. I think what it means is it needs to be a strategic picture. So as long as those are strategic decisions and certainly planned capital investments and things like that, that's fine. Now, what I would warn you of is seeing that orange and yellow bar being consistently over the teal bar year after year. So that means that you're likely dipping into your working capital, which means that would be your current assets less your current liabilities. So again, all three funds do have positive working capital, meaning you have cash remaining after you pay your current liabilities. So planned investments are a good thing, but just making sure that they are planned and within your master plan and your long-term projections is important to keep in mind. So all three of these next slides really tell you the same story, just for a different fund. So I think I didn't want to get into all the detail, but certainly wanted to make sure that everyone understood what was intended with those slides.
Thank you. We also have had these.
Okay, great.
So
awesome.
At least I have.
So I think at this point, I will turn it over to Alicia. She wanted to spend a few minutes with you on the letter, and then we can take some questions.
Thank you.
Thank you, Amanda. We have two more documents that we just want to note. One says federal awards on the front. So that is the report relating to the audit of your federal expenditures. And so maybe there's 2 points 2 pages I'll note. Page 6 shows all of the expenditures related to federal awards that the city had for fiscal 2019, just for your interest and observation. And then page 8, which is the last page, is really the results. That's kind of like the summary report card, which basically you can see at a glance, no exceptions, no findings, no issues, clean opinion. So great results there, as can be expected and as has been the case in the past. One more document that and certainly if you want me to say more, you have questions on the federal awards audit, please let me know. Otherwise, I will maybe just note a couple things for
Any
reference in
questions
the
on
other
the
letter.
federal? Go ahead.
Okay. And so the last letter is required communication of the results of our audit. You may recall receiving a letter from us before we started the audit, and so we have responsibility to kind of report out on, if we were able to conduct the audit in accordance with plan and what the results of our audit were. So we are pleased to report that also on your financial statement audit, there were no findings, no deficiencies that we identified, no changes to the numbers that were presented by your team based on our recommendations, so all very positive results. There are a couple things that I would maybe draw your attention to on the letter, and then you can maybe let me know if you have questions or want me to talk about them, or you just want to read them at your own leisure. One is on page 2. At the bottom, we just did note that there was new accounting policies adopted and reporting related to the income tax. It's fairly self-explanatory. On page 3, we are required to talk about significant estimates. The couple that are there are kind of recurring year over year. The new one that's been added relates to income tax, so we just wanted you to make you aware of that. So Tyler talked about the revenue that was recorded for income tax, but there is also a liability for estimated refunds. It's just that, it's an estimate, and so we just need to make you aware of that. We think it's a good estimate, though, and it's a fair one. The bottom of page 3, there was one item that your team management made a decision to record a certain way. The accounting rules would technically have it recorded a little bit differently. We agreed that it doesn't materially misrepresent your financial statements, and so we agreed to leave it. But we are required to point that out to the governing body. That's really it on the audit results. The rest we just really wanted to leave for your information. There's a lot of legislative items in here, things that your team's dealing with. One thing I maybe would just ask you to give a quick read to is on page 5 at the top. It feels like every week, if not every other week, we are getting phone calls from clients that have had a cyber security attack. It happened again last week with one of my clients with a third-party host. Their third-party host who, prides himself on being super secure. Let us host your system. We can protect you better than you can protect yourself. And they were hacked, and my client was not able to get to their data for weeks. And so we're just really worried about our clients, and we want to engage the governing body and the administration on this topic with your IT department. For folks who even have the best-in-class systems and the best-in-class IT directors and teams, it's really important to test your system, to have somebody come in and do a third-party test and make sure everything's working as intended. So I did, if nothing else, I wanted to draw your attention to that on page 5, just because of and you turn on the TV, you're seeing it also.
Yeah.
So we'll leave it there. If there's something else you want us to cover in the letter or in the financials that we haven't covered, please let us know. If there are questions, we can take them now.
Any questions? I just have one comment to George. Can we get that looked at pretty quickly and put it on a discussion agenda, maybe?
Yes, we can in a general sense, because we wouldn't talk about all of our specific IT
No,
systems,
yeah.
but we actually have Chris King here in case the question came up. We've
Okay.
had it. This prompted further discussion. I have the discussion regularly about internet security and all of the spamming and all of the ransomwares that go on. So we have, I think, robust systems and robust protection. Nothing is foolproof, but we certainly can talk more about it with council and are happy to do that.
And maybe it would be something for a closed meeting if we need to feel more secure.
Well, we certainly can talk about it in a general sense, about all the
Okay.
steps we take, yes.
Okay, thank you. All right, no questions. Thank you very much.
Your Honor?
Oh, I'm sorry, one
Just
question.
one quick thing. I wanted to thank Plante
Oh, sure.
Moran for all of their efforts year in and year out. They do a great job, very professional, to thank their team for their work, and also to thank our internal finance team. Jill and all of her staff members do a great job. I think this document shows day in and day out their professionalism in making sure the finances are well run in the organization. So thank you to both groups for their work.
And I will second that. Your job starts well before we ever see the proposed budget, and it doesn't end until about the time you have to start that again, so sorry. But thank you very much.
Thank you all.
Yep.
Appreciate it.
Okay, the next item on the agenda is the consent agenda. Mr. Lahanis.
Okay, thank you. We have the following items on the consent agenda for council's consideration. Item 4.1, approve the City of East Lansing Human Relations Commission sponsorship of the 20th Annual Dr. Williams G. Anderson Lecture Series, Slavery to Freedom, An American Odyssey, which will be offered in February 2020, and authorize the city manager to approve a sponsorship level up to but not exceeding $2,500. Item 4.2, approve a 3-year contract for cross-connection control inspection services with H2O Compliance Services Incorporated, and authorize the city manager to sign. Item 4.3, approve the City Council 2020 meeting schedule. Item 4.4, appoint Lindsay Gray to the Historic District Commission for a partial term ending December 31st, 2021. And item 4.5, approve a resolution congratulating Colonel James Allen on over 31 years of service in the United States Army. Those are all the items on the consent agenda for council's consideration.
Thank you. Could I have any questions for Mr. Lahanis? Would anybody like anything moved to the business agenda? Could I have a motion to accept the consent agenda? So moved, Councilmember Babcock, seconded by Councilmember Gregg. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, the consent agenda has been accepted. So the next item is the first item on the business agenda, consideration of ordinance 1476, an ordinance to amend the Historic District Commission rules of procedure, establish preservation guidelines, and allow for solar energy technologies. And our staff on this is Mr. Parcell.
Yeah, just real quick, I just wanted to introduce the new council members to our community development analyst in our planning department, Jake Parcell.
Nice to meet
He's
you.
also our historic preservation officer, and he took the lead on this ordinance, so he's here to give you a brief overview and then answer any questions you might have. So, Jake?
Thank
you. Thank you very much. Welcome to City Council. We're very happy and excited to be able to work with you. And definitely thank you also to Councilmember Meadows, who took the lead to implement some of the changes based on the comment from the Historic District Commission at the last meeting into this ordinance, and hopefully find a happy medium for this ordinance that we can use to help go moving forward. I wrote a memo in here that hopefully gave you an outline of the timeline and the information that we kind of added and revised through here. The first in section 20-03 was striking the definition for East Lansing guidelines for work in historic districts. It was a similar, if not the same, definition as preservation guidelines, so I rewrote a reference for that document that we're working on crafting now into that definition, rather than having it completely put in there on its own. Second, for section 20-63, my vice chair of the Historic District Commission mentioned that the numbers that were struck, which is section C, subsections 1 through 5, were taken from the Local Historic District Act of 169 of 1970. They wanted those brought back into the ordinance. A lot of these and a lot of the work we do is done on a case-by-case basis, and this from that act in 1970 kind of gives the justification for that. And then finally, there was some rephrasing text and elimination of subsection F, A through C in section 20-101 at the very end of the document. And that's a brief overview of all the changes that I believe you have in front of you.
So I'm sorry, for the section C, 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, those are going back in?
Yes.
Okay. So that's not the version that we have, or is that the version?
No, you do have that version.
You've got two versions.
I think there's a couple versions in there, yeah. There should be one titled in there 12.3 edits.
Okay, perfect.
Mayor Pro Tem.
All right, any questions?
Yeah, so the last section, F, under 20, was struck in the most recent edit.
Yes.
So we had received a communication from a former council member that had pushed for this originally, that had serious concern with that. So I'm trying to assess what the striking of that means. So this was obviously the, I think, meat of this that said you can't deny it.
Yes.
So how would this go about now? So the Historic District Commission would have the right to deny based on what guidelines?
So I think the discussion that initially took place back in October when the Historic District Commission met and described this is that there was enough to allow for in the affirmative in subsection 20 of section 20-101 that we wouldn't have many grounds to prohibit anything, which is really not our intent either way. We don't like to prohibit things or exclude things. So by allowing flexibility in what's allowed or maintaining things on how it's allowed there, they have the freedom to look at the application as is on a case-by-case basis and determine and help the applicant guide where it should be placed. Additionally, I think there was some concern by the Historic District Commission, particularly in A and B, that they were a little difficult to interpret or enforce. Sure. So I think they were more comfortable in having that struck from there so that there wasn't something stating that there was no reason for denial, and then working with what is allowed to find something that we can work with the applicants to approve. And if you see in Chesterfield Hills, there's already a lot of these already up on the roofs there that have come in previous to my time here. So it's definitely something we've been working with, but section 20-101 A, B, C, and now D are there to kind of help guide in the right direction, so when the applications come to us, they're much more complete. And then that will also be re-described and put into, with some hopeful text examples, the East Lansing guidelines for work in historic districts, which will be a more comprehensive list on sustainable guidelines in the districts.
Okay. And do you have another question? Yeah, there's a section of this that I can't read just because of a page number, but it's fine.
Councilmember Meadows?
I just wanted to add a little bit to it, which I think if you take a look at the way that we restructured those 4 paragraphs, essentially what they say is there's not going to be a denial because there are these actions that can be taken to make sure that this fits within the guidelines that are applicable here. So I think if in the future we run into a problem, I know we always hear things about windows not being allowed to be, changed or something like that. If we start to run into significant problems, I think we should take a look at this again. But I think this sets it up so that the language is flexible enough that if somebody comes in with a proposal that wouldn't necessarily be acceptable, the commission is allowed to order it to be, on the back, roof, or just a short amount of distance off the roof, or in an area that doesn't impact the historic significance of the building. So I think the way the language has been changed, and the Historic District Commission chair and vice chair indicated they were satisfied with this language that takes care of their issue, and it also allows us to encourage the installation of solar in historic districts.
Can I just ask
Sure.
one clarification question about that? So I think one of the problems with having the commission involved with dictating the placement of the solar panels is that solar technology is based on the placement of the sun. So I think, is there some protection in here, and I read through it, but it's a little bit gobbledygooky, that I think there was originally some language about limiting the increase of the cost, or...
It's 20, the placement is 20 subsection B.
Okay, so
And
that's
that was
one...
changed to prohibit the placement.
To prohibit the placement. Okay. So we're relatively satisfied that that wouldn't be a problem?
Mayor Pro Tem.
So I have a few issues with this. I think to Councilmember Gregg's comments, I mean, we all know that we're in the Northern Hemisphere. You place the solar panels facing the south, and this language specifically outlines, and this is obviously not on you, this is just my own opinion on this, prohibiting placement of solar technology on street-facing walls or roofs, and it's saying the certificate of appropriateness may do that. That is giving the Historic District Commission that kind of leeway to do that, and I think that this is the original point of this ordinance, was to make sure that this is as accessible as possible, and I think that with solar energy technology, that's a pretty big part of it. And then, to the point of, not necessarily knowing the full understanding of preserving public health or safety, I would say that C, under that same section, where it says would result in a permanent loss of significant character defining historic resources, I would say that as well is something that's not really there to outline, as well. So, I feel like what these changes did, well, I 100% commend trying to find a middle ground on it. I feel like this kind of reverses and gives the leeway and the oversight back to the commission and I have spoken to commissioners that are very in favor of solar technology, and I love that, and it's a good thing. But these commissioners won't be there forever. Solar technology is hopefully the future of a lot of things, and if we're going to outline that we want to see these without much hindrance, then I don't feel comfortable with what this language is right now.
Do you have a proposed amendment?
Could I make a suggestion there?
Yes,
I
definitely.
think for a happy
Please.
medium, then instead of that, rather than adding in the language in F that was struck for shall not be denied, if you strike B, prohibit the placement of solar technology on street-facing walls or roofs, including those on side streets, that would open it back up to being allowed on all sides, because understandably there are structures that are facing south throughout the city, so that would provide more flexibility there. And
So we're
then
talking about section D.
this would be 20.
All right, one at a time, please. One at a time. Go ahead.
In 20, section 20-101, subsection 20, letter B, the prohibit the placement of solar technology on streets facing walls or street-facing walls or roofs, including those facing side streets. There's ways to accomplish that while being minimally obtrusive to the overall facade of the building, as designated by the Secretary of Interior standards and some of the graphics there. So I think that if you strike that text, that opens up the possibility to place it anywhere on the property or structure. And then also,
Hang on right there for a minute.
yeah.
So would you like to make that as a proposed amendment?
I would.
We gotta get a motion
Yeah, we don't
first.
have a motion yet.
Oh,
On it.
hang on.
We're still asking staff.
Just hang on. Go ahead, sorry.
I think also the previously struck 20 subsection A, require use of a roof-mounted solar energy. I like that being struck because there are ground-mounted facilities people could put in their structure. So I think the way it's written, if you strike B, allows for the option to do ground-mounted, place it on a non-historic addition or accessory structure, which we are all well aware are relevant throughout our city. And it strikes the prohibiting the placement, which gives them a full ability to apply to put it anywhere on their entire property.
So B
Yes,
out, but I didn't catch the other one.
that's it. The other one was already struck in this draft.
Okay,
that
so-
everyone sees. So I think that by taking out B and then keeping F out, you give them more ability and flexibility without effectively saying that you can't deny something. Another point of contention is that's the only place in the ordinance that says that you can't deny something. So, I mean, like I said, our goal is not to deny anything. Our goal is to let everything go through. And if you just strike B, then you can have an application for anywhere on the property that isn't specifically outlawed in the ordinance.
Sure. And would you by any chance have any suggestion on C then, on that language that, or do you, in your professional opinion, do you believe that that is not up to question, that is very strict? Because that I mean, if that's a concern with, F subsection A, then
Yeah.
I see the exact same concern with C there, that
It's more of a general statement, giving them the power to say, this isn't historic enough, is what you're afraid of?
yeah, I mean, we're talking about trying to access as much, and we're trying to let things through, but, even when it says prohibit if we get rid of that, you still have the option for, well, this is a permanent loss of,
Right.
character, and I don't know that
Yeah.
definition, but if you think that that's,
Councilmember Meadows?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll just say that this is actually a pretty limited ability. It must result in the permanent loss of
Yeah.
the historic character, and that's their job, is to determine the historic character.
Yeah.
So I don't see how this is, so broad that we would have any particular problem with it.
No, I think that C is okay. I think it helps provide a little bit of the potential for dialogue. So if you're covering some decorative fascia or some type of railing or detailing on a roof, or there's some particular gabling, you could say, well, what if we moved it up a few inches this way or over that way? Would you be comfortable if we did this or something like that with the applicant? I think that ultimately just puts in something to bring the intent of the ordinance back into the final chapter, which is what they do. But I don't think that will ever really be an issue,
And
one way or the other.
it's not permanent anyway, is it? I mean, it could be removed.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, if they
They
take
can't
out,
say it's permanent, no
Yeah.
matter where you put it.
if they take out a window or they remove something entirely on the house to put this on here, then that's the only instance where that may come in. Or if you have a dormer window or something, and they're like, well, we're going to cut that off. And
So
put
actually,
something
I
on.
want to clarify that point that you just made, because that's an interesting thing that I didn't think about. So permanent, you know, these are possible. You can't say that these solar panels are going to be there permanently.
Yeah.
So
It's like, I actually talked to the historic district with an issue on my house, something that you put in that's permanent, like a window is permanent. Because you've
Right.
taken out an old window, you put in a vinyl window, that's permanent. But if you put a room air conditioner that changes the whole look of the house, that's not permanent. So they
Yeah.
can't say it
Interesting.
permanently changes the character. And I
Yeah.
assume solar would be the
so
same.
this would be in most regards removing something.
Yeah, I think the
Okay.
C is more of if you take something off of the house that exists there to put this on,
Right.
then we would have the ability to open dialogue to say, well,
Okay.
let's think about what we're doing with that.
All right, then I think I'm comfortable with that.
Councilmember Meadows? We don't, before we go on, any more questions for staff? All right, you got a motion?
I got a motion.
Okay.
It would be to move this version, this last version that Jake was talking about, with a change to section 20-101B20 to strike subsection paren B and re-letter the remaining two subsections.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
I think it's been discussed. Anything more?
I have a point of order.
Yes.
Just for clarification, you're referring to the old version that was identified as 12.3 in the packet, correct?
Yes,
Yes.
this should be
Thank you.
the most recently added.
And
Did you get that? Okay.
As a random tiny thing, it's it's 20-101 subsection 20 subsection B.
Correct, that's what I thought I
B20,
said.
yeah.
Okay. Councilman, Mayor Pro Tem?
So I want you to keep us updated on this.
Definitely.
If there are denials based on, I want to know whether this is working or not in a full effect. I have every indication that our professional staff and our commissions are going to be pushing for this in a respectful and good way to maintain our historic districts and also make sure that we can use future technology. But since this is kind of the first time we're addressing this in ordinance language, I know that there will be issues that arise later down the line that we might need to look at. So, I'm not all the way there on a lot of this language, but I think if we're going to a happy medium, then that's fine.
Yeah.
Especially with the amendment that was proposed. But I do want to make sure that, if there are issues that come up, bring it up at a discussion-only meeting. I'm happy to be the council member that wants it on the agenda, just so we can discuss it as a full council.
Yeah. No, we're really excited with the direction this is heading, and we're really excited to be ahead of the 8 ball on this one. So I really appreciate all the work put in on this.
Any other questions? I will say thank you to the newly appointed member of the Historic District, or representative to the Historic District, Councilmember Meadows. Thank you for grabbing this by the horns and wrenching it around.
Glad to have done it.
All right, so the motion is on the table. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, same? Okay, the ordinance 1476 has been approved. The next item, 5.2, is consideration of a resolution to place on the ballot at the next election to be held March 10th, 2020, the question of whether the city council should be authorized to sell city-owned property to Michigan State Federal Credit Union for the construction of a commercial building. And the staff on this is Mr. Faribault.
Good evening. Give me a moment here, and I'll pull up my presentation. All right. Great. So thank you, Mayor and Council. Before you tonight is a consideration of placing an item on the ballot for the voters to approve the sale of property, Lot 4, to MSU FCU for the purposes of building an office building that would contain their branch offices, a community space, an innovation space for their intern center, as well as some office space. So just to get you started here, I'll give you a little context about Lot 4. Here is kind of a diagram from campus looking to the north. You can orient yourself with Center City, and there's parking lot 4 there behind where Park District is going up. Here's kind of an overview showing you the Lot 4 as it currently is configured, and then there is where the addition will be created through the realignment of Albert Avenue, which is going to be developed here in the next few months by the Park District project to the south there. So we've been actively preparing to market this property for some time. In fact, it's been part of the Park District planning area for quite some time, and it's been included actually in some previous project proposals that did not come to fruition. And this is the surveyed kind of space, so you just give you a kind of an idea of the parcel that will be put together. So, sorry about that. A little faster than the computer here. So, in terms of the timeline, in July of this year, we conducted a business retention visit with the MSU Federal Credit Union. This is a typical visit we try to conduct with especially our major employers and top tax revenue generators. We discussed current events, developments, and also inquired about their interest in expanding their presence downtown. We learned that they did, in fact, have an interest in expanding downtown. We discussed several city-owned properties as potential opportunity sites, and they indicated their interest specifically to City Lot number 4. In follow-up conversations and meetings with the development team, as well as representatives from MSU FCU, we answered some questions, provided context regarding the site, the current zoning, the comprehensive plan, et cetera. We also at that point learned of their desire to purchase and not lease any property that they would like to develop in downtown East Lansing. So in October and November, they at that point had developed a draft of a concept, including some renderings. We had some additional discussions. Their concept at that time included a 5-story building with the potential of potentially going higher, depending on their demand for the office space and their uses there. They did indicate that they would like to have a branch on the ground floor, a place for their interns and their innovation center, as well as space for the community. My understanding is MSU FCU holds a number of community events and also makes their space available to nonprofits, including the city, for various community activities, and then as well as some office space. We learned that this location would be ideal for MSU FCU, especially as it relates to their ability to enhance the talent pipeline from Michigan State University and to have a premier presence in downtown East Lansing. We then had conversations about the process for a land sale of city-owned property, and the fact that anything of this size would need to go to the voters for consideration, and also discussed a process for establishing what the fair market value would be. Staff went ahead and initiated through our trusted appraiser a fair market value of the property, which was established a couple weeks ago at $810,000. We also drafted ballot language, which we shared with MSU FCU, and ultimately they also agreed that it was appropriate. So in late November, I believe last week, MSU FCU brought this item to their board for approval to make this formal request of the city to place this item on the ballot. Then that is what is in front of you tonight for your consideration to place on the March 10th, 2020 ballot for the voters then to consider whether they would approve the sale of this property for the potential development by MSU FCU. If you do decide to place this on the ballot tonight, the expected process would include an application for a site plan and special use permit, which would start the process in earnest in terms of the approval for a project there. That would be expected to go through the Planning Commission, DDA, and Council, as well as other boards and commissions. That would be where we discuss the actual building features and design, the impacts in terms of transportation and parking and infrastructure, as well as the conditions of approval. Concurrently, we would begin negotiations on a purchase and sale agreement, which would include the actual terms of the sale, and I would expect that we would be negotiating it for this project only. In terms of policy considerations for the council, and that staff used to guide our item tonight, we really look to the comprehensive plan, the council's strategic priorities, and the economic development strategic plan. In terms of the comprehensive plan, goal 2 is to have a diversified, growing tax base and vital economy. We have an objective to increase the attraction and vitality of downtown for all demographic groups, and an action under that to create a strategy to attract more office users to the downtown core. In terms of the comp plan, we also look at the future zoning, future land use map. Here's the current zoning. You can see that parking lot number 4 is currently zoned C, community facilities. This is the future land use map, and it is expected to be zoned M4, which is analogous to our current B3 zoning. It would allow 8 stories or 112 feet with an SUP. And the height could be increased to 140 feet west of Abbott in this area with 3/4 vote of the council. In terms of the council's strategic priorities, actively encourage, these are some we thought were relevant, actively encourage the redevelopment of the Park District area, continue to implement policies which attract more diverse age groups to live in downtown, continued efforts to ensure the city's financial viability, enhance the city's economic sustainability, and lease, not sell, city-owned properties to maintain a revenue stream. So I think that's important to note that that is not in alignment with the council's priorities. In terms of the economic development strategic plan, which was approved early this year, we have a goal to expand and diversify the tax base, with really a sub-goal and actions to update our efforts on the city and DDA-owned properties. We also have a goal of a vibrant, authentic city and downtown district, and ultimately we have a goal of supporting development and tenanting of office users, specifically in downtown. So in terms of the pros and cons of your consideration of this ballot initiative, or this ballot, potential ballot question, we would see that this potential purchase would be aligned with several of the major policy goals of the city, including the direct benefits it would provide in terms of the purchase price, as well as the ongoing stream of property tax and income tax revenue. We see this as adding jobs to the downtown core, which would strengthen the pipeline of talent from MSU and the opportunities for them to find employment here, downtown East Lansing, right across Grand River Avenue. We see this as a diversification of uses downtown, specifically office, adding that into the mix, and adding customers for retail and restaurant and service businesses through those folks that will work in those offices. And also potential for new housing demand for employees that may choose to live or work downtown. We also see this as supporting the retention and local growth of a major employer and community investor in MSU FCU, and the redevelopment of this highly visible parcel for an office use with the ground floor branch, the community room, and some additional office space. Also, we see as a pro that this project would only move forward if the voters approve it in March. In terms of the cons, certainly the sale of the property, which they've indicated is really something they desire, and ultimately that is not in alignment with the stated council's priority. The opportunity cost of other projects that may want to develop on this parcel, that may may want to have a long-term lease structure and create a long-term revenue stream. And then also the potential stress on the parking system with the loss of the current 33 spaces there. Ultimately, that issue would need to be studied as part of the SUP and site plan process, as well as in the context of the other developments on the west side of Abbott. So these are some renderings that they've provided. They're conceptual. They're kind of a starting place for your consideration. I think they wanted to provide you with some context of what they had planned. Ultimately, the deadline for the March 10th ballot is 4 p.m. on Tuesday the 17th, which is why it's in front of you tonight. This is the draft ballot language that we had drafted. And then I wanted to point out also that Councilmember Meadows has provided some alternative ballot language for your consideration as well. With that, I will point out that there's representatives of MSU FCU as well as their development team present tonight. If you wish for them to address council or answer any questions, they'd be happy to do so.
Thank you. Before I get to Councilmember Meadows, I want to take the privilege of going first. I have been asking for analysis like this since I got on council, pros and cons without feeling pushed. And that was just excellent. So if we could just have all of our analysis like that, that would just be,
Thank you.
that was very, very helpful for me. And it basically took away all the things I needed to say. But I will say that also for the last 6 years, we get proposals for apartments and we said, how about some office? And we get proposals for apartments, how about some office? And we always got back, there's not enough profit in office. So I know that we've been asking the city manager to work with your department to actively seek an office user. And when Mr. Johannes came back a few months ago and said, we might be able to get MSU on that corner, I was just beside myself. So with joy. With joy, yes, beside myself. Self, how do you feel? I feel good, with joy, because it's going to be a user who will be there 12 months of the year during the day, and I think that will start to change the face of the downtown. So I don't have any questions of my own. I just wanted to say thank you. And the user being the MSU Federal Credit Union, of which I've been a member since 1978, is, for me, I can't think of a better place because it's got potential for people to work there, potential for people to graduate and work there, and then people to live downtown and be downtown. So just good work all around, and the presentation was just extra icing. Councilmember Meadows.
Just a couple of questions actually for you. When would you expect that they would submit a site plan to begin the process?
Probably within the next couple months would be my expectation.
And we would not have, assuming that we get approval to sell this property, that would not take place until March 10th?
That's correct.
And so on other projects where there is, an ownership that is not in the developer, we've had, in the past, we've issued a letter allowing them to submit their site plan even though they don't own the property. Have we issued that?
We have not.
Does
So
that
we-
have to come to council?
We would need to do that, yes.
Okay, so I just wanted to make sure we get all the pieces together if we're going to go forward with this. So those are my only questions.
Mayor Pro Tem.
So my question is actually along a very similar vein. By the way, same comments as the mayor. Love the pros and cons. I think it outlined a difference in council priorities, but I think it outlined a lot of really good things and some things to consider. So absolutely great. And I love to hear from our professionals that we have employed here on what we should be looking at, because we don't always look at every angle. So, but I along a similar vein. So one thing that I definitely think is a pro about this project is that it gets to get voted on by the people of East Lansing. I mean, when do you get to say, the people of East Lansing, if they want it, they can have it. If they don't, then they can just say no. But one aspect of that for me is the site plan. So along a similar vein, I mean, is there a possibility that we could, before the election, before it gets voted on, have them talk at a discussion-only meeting about what that site, so we can get that out in the public so that people I mean, I think that the original ballot language does outline what's going to be there. But, you know, people are going to have concerns about parking, right? People are going to have concerns about where is that story actually going to be. So, you know, I would love to see a conversation of that before people actually get to vote, so people know fully what they're voting on.
We could certainly make that request, and I don't want to put the members.
Yeah, and maybe
at the moment,
MSUFCU could answer that better than.
Don't forget the absentees. 'Cause
Yes, of course.
I'd just like to say we'd be happy to work with you to do that. You know, we'll make every effort to try to make some, you know, quick decisions, and, you know, we're working through this. We don't know how many
Yeah.
stories we're looking at just yet, but we're making all of those decisions, and we can do that fairly quickly.
Do you know when absentee ballots would be issued around that? Does anybody have a sense of that?
30 days before.
30 days before.
So February, late February.
So do you think that by our February discussion only meeting, you guys would have a draft site plan? And I'm sorry, I don't.
Yeah.
It'll certainly be submitted by then.
Okay. I mean,
Well, I think we can make every effort to do so. We have a couple board meetings coming up, so we'll have to get that information in front of our board to make that decision. So we have a board meeting mid-December, where we're going to be talking a little bit more about the project. And then I'm looking at our architect, who's also going to have to, you know, we're just going to have to work very hard to make that happen, right?
Yeah.
So we have, you know, some testing and some other things that we have to do, but we'll make every effort to try to get that information in front of you.
I appreciate that, and just so you know, for the architect's sake, our February discussion only meeting is February 18th.
February 18th, okay.
Based on the consent agenda that we just approved tonight. And for me, I think this is a cool opportunity for the people of East Lansing to get to I mean, we can we try our best to represent, you know, our constituents, but at the end of the day, you know, we're gonna miss the mark for some. So giving them a full understanding of what this project could mean. And by the way, I'm very, very happy for the potential of office in our downtown, but giving them that full breadth is, I think, a really good thing that we can do as a service to our constituents to make sure that they're fully educated when they're taking that vote.
Thank you. Anything else?
Nope.
Questions?
Thank you.
I don't have a question, but I have a comment, but not directed to you. I just
the ether?
Yeah, to
Comment
the ether. Well, kind of to the planning staff. I think, you know, I was kind of struck looking through this about your statement that you made right after you accepted this esteemed position of mayor about the outline of how development projects would go forward in the future, where our professional staff meets with their professional staff, they sort out the details that can be sorted out, and then it comes to us when there's a decision to be made. And if it comes to us in this format, like, super great, because that is wonderful. And so I think that, you know, if this is what development in East Lansing looks like going forward, then this is certainly a great way to start that process. So.
Yep, I agree. Any other questions?
General comment.
Yes.
So, I agree with Councilmember Gregg and the mayor as well. We've owned office space in our downtown for a long time, and MSUFCU is a really incredible company and organization that's done a lot of great community. I mean, I can't list how many random charity events that I'm at that they have a representative at, which is, you know, obviously their company, and I am a member, not as long as 1973 granted, but they've done a lot great for our community, and they're a great organization too. I was going back and forth because, you know, we just went through with an RFP for the DDA properties. This specifically outlines a sale to a specific company on our ballot language, and I was struggling with the idea that, well, you know, we want a public process. We want to make sure we're getting the most money for whatever parcel we're looking at, and we want to make sure that we're doing our due diligence to our constituents. And I thought about it a little bit more after hearing some feedback from some people online and different things. And I realized I think the most service that we can do to our constituents is having them vote on it. As simple as that sounds, when do you get the opportunity to have a development project voted on by the full city of East Lansing? Because then if you're a person who doesn't believe that we're getting the right price for this, or you're a person who doesn't agree with this project as proposed, then vote no, because that is absolutely your right. And so I think I would love to actually farm out a few votes that we take to the entire constituency of East Lansing.
That would be California.
Yeah, sure. But, at the end of the day, I don't represent me. I represent the people of East Lansing. And so by me, and I will be voting yes on this, by me voting yes on this, I feel like I am giving my vote away and giving it to the people that I represent to make that decision for this council.
Got it. Any other questions? Yes, Councilmember Babcock.
I was once as optimistic about elections as Councilmember Stevens, and maybe I've just turned into a cynical husk of a human. I think it's a good thing to turn this over, and I want to say I love MSU FCU. I don't know when I became a member. It was down in the building where IBM is now, so it's been some time, right? And it's a great entity in the community. It supports the arts. I love the idea, of bringing MSU students, grabbing that talent, growing that talent, bringing it downtown. I like the idea of an office building downtown. And as a side note, MSU FCU has been spectacular with the Girl Scouts. Through March through, say, June, Girl Scout leaders come to the tellers crying because we have hundreds of dollars in cookie sales and quarters and $20 bills, and I want to thank you for that. They walk us back from the cliff. They are very kind, and they manage all of those accounts. I also appreciate the staff's pros and cons. That was helpful, very professional. Thank you. Unfortunately, I've been on council for 3 weeks, and this is the second council meeting of 2 where I've been asked to approve something or not, and it has to be done right now. We are not going to turn into pumpkins at midnight, and with all due respect to MSU, as a fiduciary, you've given a lot of thought to this. You've had many months to put into it. We have technology. I reached out to people online. I've been asking people, and there is a sentiment that it's good to put this on the ballot. But there is a very grave concern that this deal was done with months of advance legwork, as development deals are and should be, but that it came to the public on Monday or Tuesday, the week of Thanksgiving weekend, and here we are being asked to vote on it. If it weren't MSU FCU, we would be looking at another do or die deal, immediate yes or no, with very little lead time, realistically no lead time, for the public to weigh in, with a single entity as the beneficiary involving city property. MSU FCU has a great track record. I appreciate that. I appreciate office space downtown, and I appreciate the values of diversifying the downtown economy. However, this is a Hobson's choice for me, because I think we should not do business this way. I think we should have a deliberative process, and I think that we should have more time than just one meeting to decide the future of a prominent downtown corner. Is it serving its purpose now? Well, no. But we haven't considered parking for this, and I know it's going to come up in the site plan process. But at this point, we're already talking about an election. We're talking about a site plan before the election. I know some people have been contacted about voting for this March 10, and it's not even on the ballot yet. I will be happy to say I am not a significant influencer, nor is my MSU FCU account large enough for me to get, this kind of attention. This is not the way we should do business, and I'm going to vote no on this, not because I have any disrespect for MSU and not because I don't share the vision of an office space, but because I think we need to draw a line in how we proceed as a council and how we proceed with development and not single entity issues. Thank you.
Anything else?
No, but I'll make a motion.
I'd like a motion.
I'll move that we approve the ballot language that has been presented to us, and then I'll move an amendment.
I'll second
at the time.
that.
Once we can get to
Okay.
discussion.
Moved by Councilmember Meadows, seconded by the Mayor Pro Tem. Any discussion?
Yes. Couple of things. I'm going to make a motion to amend this language to include a requirement that the proceeds from the sale be utilized and deposited in the pension fund. And I just want to talk about why I think that's the right way to go. It wasn't as much of an issue in the current election that just passed, and it wasn't as much of an issue in the 2017 election, but a lot of the effort that has been made by City Council over the last 4 years has been to address this significant unfunded liability that the city has been facing. And so the income tax proposal, the putting together of the financial health team, the implementation of the financial health team's recommendations, all were related to the fact that we had this looming problem within the community. And we've made significant contributions to the pension fund over the last 4 years, additional contributions over and above what we're required by law to make in an attempt to deal with it. And during some part of that period, our actual percentage, which was I think about 54% in 54% funded in 2015, actually reduced at one point, and then now I think we're on the upswing a little bit. And in the budget this year, we have I think $4.5 million of extra money that we are putting in there. We have a land sale, a little controversial land sale, but a land sale that brought in $1 million into the city coffers, and we have yet decided how we're going to use that money going forward. But primarily for the reason that I think that the income tax was passed because the community recognized that they were able to identify how that money was going to be spent once it was collected, that it was going to be spent on infrastructure improvements, that it was going to be spent on public safety, and 60% of it was going to be spent on contributions to this unfunded liability that we have. Our 2019 property tax revenues are predicted, I think, to be about $17,751,000 dollars. And our required pension payment is $8.3 million. So almost 50% of our property tax revenue is currently going into pay our required annual payment. And if we don't make significant contributions to the pension fund, we're going to have a hard time making inroads, even with the income tax money that we are able to put in, which is about $3 million a year, because we're going to have to find that other $2 million. If we don't put $5 million in a year, we're going to be, in some respects, spinning our wheels as we go forward. We'll gradually increase the percentage of or lessen the amount of unfunded liability, but it'll take a much longer time to get there. If we can make $5 million a year, by the time the income tax expires anyway, we'll be about 82% funded. If we don't do that, we'll be significantly less than that. So any additional money that we can put in, I think, is important to us. This is essentially found money. If this is approved by the voters, this is going to be $810,000 and almost another $1 million that goes in and helps us reach our $5 million a year objective. So for that reason, I distributed an amendment that would let the people decide that they want to dedicate the proceeds from this sale. For all the reasons that Councilmember Stevens said, this is putting this decision in the hands of the voters, just like we did with the income tax. I want to note that we have put property development proposals on the ballot before. We had one on the ballot, I think, in 2014. Was that the DTN? Was that the year? The DTN proposal. It failed at the ballot box. There was a proposal, actually, the original Marriott Hotel proposal was on the ballot, and it failed at the ballot box, and then they leased the property subsequently. I don't think there's a plan to do that here, by the way. So I want to move the amendment. I'll tell you why I took out some of the language. It concerns me a little bit. The language, as it's currently stated, says the proposal will include a branch, which of course we expect will happen, intern, offices, office space, community room. We basically are saying this must be there in this way, or I guess there's a reversion back to us of the property. I mean, essentially that's what it says. I'd be more comfortable if it said may include that, because I think that as the development proposal goes through the Planning Commission and is looked at by the architect, there may be some switches or changes, and down the road, MSU, FCU may say, we don't want to have an intern center in there, we just want to have all our offices in there, and then they're in violation of the original ballot proposal. So I don't mind that language being there, but I think it should be more flexible. I took it out because I don't think it needs to be in there, but I've got some additional language that we could put in there if the rest of council felt that way. Anyway, I'm making a motion to change the ballot proposal, substitute the ballot proposal that I had drafted for the ballot proposal that we currently have before us.
I can read it. Oh, okay.
Slides. We can go to slide number 2 of that, right, Tom?
Okay, I'm going to respond to your, actually, we need a second. So you made a proposal, you had a motion?
If there's no second, then we're just going to
Do we have a
the
second?
regular thing.
Okay, so we are back to the original motion, and I'd like to make an amendment to amend the ballot question to take out will, to strike will and add may in the first sentence. So it would say, not to exceed a height of 112 feet, which may include, is that where I would put that,
Yeah, that would be good.
Tom?
May include an MSU, FCU branch.
And I agree. I know that MSU, FCU looked at this language already, but they may not have been thinking about the future, what they might actually want to do in this building, so they
Do
can
you
still.
want to change the second will to may also?
Where's the second one?
The second one, say, will be utilized to.
Yes.
Okay.
Is there a second for?
Second.
Discussion?
Yeah, so I would love to hear from MSU-FCU on this, just because this was the language that was approved by your board. And so, and by the way, if that is what is committed to intern center, office space, community room, branch office, I'm very happy with that, because that outlines, again, more for voters what is going to be there.
They can still do,
I know.
sorry, they can still, the may allows them to do it, but sure, if the credit union would like to talk about will and may?
I think that makes a lot of sense.
Okay.
We certainly want to have that flexibility in the future. We're going to be here for a long time if
Okay.
this goes through, so thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions about this amendment? All those in favor of the amendment, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, so the amendment is made. Do you have that? The 2 mays? Okay, any more discussion about the ballot question? So the motion is on the table. All those in favor, please, as amended, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Nay.
The motion is passed, or the ballot question is approved, and the motion is passed. All right, thank you. The next item on the agenda is item 5.3, to introduce and refer to the Planning Commission Ordinance 1480, an ordinance to amend the zoning use district map of Chapter 50, zoning of the Code of the City of East Lansing to rezone lot number 4 and Albert Avenue right-of-way from C, Community Facilities District, to B3, City Center Commercial District. And do we have staff? Yes.
Great, let me just pull up a map here really quick.
3.
Oh, I see it. Okay, so obviously this is in connection with the item that was just approved by council regarding the MSU-FCU land proposal in order to kind of start paving the way for that development. We figured it was.
Is that a pun?
Yeah, of course.
Boo.
Kind of begin the process for facilitating the development there. One of the items, of course, is rezoning the property. So this proposal would be to rezone the Lot 4 and then the vacated portion of Albert Street to B3. B3 is the preferred choice as it's necessary to achieve the height that's proposed or the range of height that's proposed in the uses. It's our most intensive commercial district for the city. It is consistent with the Master Plan M4 future land use category, which would allow up to 140 feet with 3/4 vote of council, and also the range of land uses that are proposed for the use. So with that, this is simply a recommendation to introduce the ordinance and refer it to the Planning Commission so they can begin the process of evaluating the appropriateness of the district in that location and make their recommendation to council.
Thank you.
With that, I'll take any questions or comments.
Yep. Any questions for staff? Can I have a motion?
So moved.
Second?
A second.
Second. Moved by Councilmember Meadows, seconded by Councilmember Gregg. Any discussion? All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion is passed. Thank you. So we are now finished with the this section of the agenda, and before we adjourn the entire council meeting, we are going to ask for a vote to go into closed session? Yes. Roll call vote to go into closed session. Will the clerk call the roll, please? Oh.
I'll make the motion.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I'll move that we move to closed session to discuss trial or settlement strategy with the city's legal counsel regarding the case of Country Mill Farms LLC v. City of East Lansing, pending in the United States District Court, Western District of Michigan, case number 1:17 CV 487.
So it's moved by Councilmember Meadows and seconded by the mayor. Will you please call the roll?
Councilmember Babcock?
Yes.
Councilmember Gregg?
Yes.
Councilmember Meadows?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Stevens?
Yes.
Mayor Byer?
Yes. Okay, so we're going into closed session, which will be down the hall. When we're done there, we will adjourn that meeting, and then we will adjourn this meeting, but we won't do any more business for the public tonight, so most people don't hang around for that. But you're welcome to. George, can I talk to you for a second?